So the gist of it today is about firefighter cancer and awareness. It's something I'm really quite passionate about, the journey with that. And I'll give you some insights I've gained from that that might be useful later. Just to give the guest speakers some background, because predominantly UCLAN have done a lot of work with the FBU, but the aviation side of things is not yet sort of included in that, but Taylor will explain that. Just to clarify, on the questionnaire that I sent out prior to the meeting, I got quite a lot of those back, and it's quite clear that there is some significant knowledge gaps in the aviation side of things. There's only one airport that's got real solid procedures in place in terms of what we're discussing. And the issue that I've got, and I'm trying to raise particular awareness on, is the transfer of risk being taken home. I call it, what are you taking home? It's a belief of mine that we inadvertently, through taking home dirty uniform that stinks, and when we've had incidents, and I did this for many, many years, that we're inadvertently transmitting a risk to our families. My own wife washed my clothes for many, many years, and she had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, 4 tumours, the year before my cancer diagnosis, and I'm convinced that there's a link. So perhaps the main specialists in the room who are here to talk, David and Taylor and Abby, have got thoughts on that. So I'll start off with David. If I can invite David, if you can just explain to people, David, who you are and what your role is, and then we'll go from there.
Hi everyone. Yes, thank you very much for giving me the chance to be involved with this. It's something I've kind of been involved with looking with for about kind of 10 years now, trying to better understand the risk of these pollutants to people like yourself that are there kind of risking your life and are very aware of some of the more immediate dangers. But then some of these cancer causing chemicals that are there in the background that maybe you don't see as much, trying to understand the risk from those has been something that I've been kind of working towards. So I'm at Manchester Metropolitan University at the moment. I'm currently our Associate Director for the Ecology and Environment Research Centre. I'm an analytical chemist by background. My other research is environmental forensics. So with environmental forensics investigations, we try and find out where pollution has come from. So a lot of my research is on developing analytical methods to measure pollutants. Many of these ones that we're talking about specifically for firefighters, some of the chemicals that are generated there are present at such low concentrations, they're so potent, that we really need some advanced analytical methods to be able to detect them and understand the risks. So a lot of my work has been towards developing analytical tools to enable us to measure these things, to find out if we do have risks or not. In the last 5 years, I've worked more closely with DWIPE. I kind of feel like as scientists, we're very good at saying there is a problem, but then maybe not quite as good at trying to find solutions to try and help the problem. So I've been really happy and fortunate to work with DWIPE to try and understand what products are available to help kind of reduce the risk to firefighters. We know that these chemicals are out there. So what technologies are there that can help try and reduce exposure? So we've been working with them to try and validate the effectiveness of decontamination wipes and shampoos to ultimately try and remove that pollution before you kind of take it back to your loved ones and before you're kind of exposed to it for too long a period. So that's kind of my background and stuff. Apologies, I've not got a fancy presentation or anything, but I'm more than happy to help try and answer any questions I can and try and raise awareness for this important issue, I think. Thank you.
Okay, David, thank you. Taylor, if you could just introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Taylor Wolfe. I'm a researcher working at the University of Central Lancashire, and I work with Professor Anna Steck, who some of you might or might not be familiar with. I have a little bit of a brief presentation. Basically, at UCLAN, we have a project running with the FBU, and the kind of central goal of that project really is to improve firefighters' health. It's something that we're all really passionate about. The kind of key motivator behind our research is unfortunately a bit of a sad issue, and that is that firefighters are suffering cancer. and they're suffering cancer at a relatively young age compared to the general population. This link between firefighting and cancer is something that has been repeatedly found across the globe, and it's probably something that you're all, kind of acutely aware of, either because you've suffered cancer yourself, or maybe you know someone in the service who has. And the reason we think that firefighters are suffering cancer is because they're regularly exposed to these harmful carcinogenic substances as part of their work. Fire incidents produce a lot of pretty nasty substances in terms of toxicity, and a lot of those substances that have been found coming off of fire incidents and fire effluent are known or have been proven to be human carcinogens. So we know they cause cancer in people. And this link has been relatively confidently established for certain groups of firefighters. For example, in the US, there's actually legislation in place that protects firefighters' right to things like workplace compensation or medical support or whatever if they develop cancer in their lifetimes. But actually, we're a little bit behind that in the UK here. In the UK, we have relatively little research that's actually available for the link between firefighters and cancer. There are some older studies which kind of look at the incidence of cancer in firefighters, but there's definitely somewhat of a lack of more or up-to-date recent evidence that we can point to. And that's a problem because it means that it's relatively easy to dismiss kind of any calls for action, calls for workplace compensation, or firefighters' accounts of cancer, etc., without that kind of hard documented evidence to give to a policymaker or anything. It's relatively easy for them to just dismiss, unfortunately. And we've actually kind of seen that with the Industrial Injuries Advisory Council recently. They failed to recognise cancer as an occupational hazard for firefighters, and therefore that kind of limits their access to any legal help or anything, for example, workplace compensation, etc. It also impacts awareness of the issue. And when I talk about awareness, I don't just mean within the fire service itself, but in other fields which might directly impact firefighters' lives. For example, the medical profession, obviously in government as well. But it would be very helpful for us, perhaps, if in the medical profession there's an understanding of the risks that firefighters face, any special screening they might need at an earlier stage, etc., so we can work with them to build these interventions for firefighters. And this ultimately compromises firefighters' access to kind of timely help, which in the case of cancer is a real issue because early intervention is so vital for successful treatment or survival of cancer. But finally, without this kind of hard documented evidence, if you like, definitely not saying there isn't any evidence, just that there is no, a lack of that kind of hard published evidence you can point to. It can make it kind of difficult for us to prevent the issue in the first place because we don't necessarily have that evidence to guide us towards which measures are going to be most effective in terms of reducing cancer risk in the first place. And that's essentially what we're trying to do. We're trying to get moving on all of these issues. We're working on projects that gather that hard evidence that we need, analysing the data from that and looking for trends and looking for specific cancer risk factors that we can target interventions at. And then we're publishing our findings and our recommendations so that they're available not only to the likes of policymakers and the powers that be, but also to firefighters themselves, who are really the ultimate stakeholders of that project. And so that we can start getting some of these changes implemented more immediately. And that kind of really brings me to discussing the decontamination guidance, which I'll mostly be focusing on in this talk. But before I get into that, I thought it might be helpful to just kind of emphasize why it's contaminants that we're concerned about, why, decontamination is a worthwhile intervention in the first place. So to do that, I thought we'd have a very quick kind of toxicology lesson, if you will. So one of the key principles of toxicology is this concept of a dose or the amount of a particular substance that you're exposed to, whether that be through inhalation, so breathing the substance in, whether it be through ingestion, so either inadvertently eating the substance because it's on your hands, or you've breathed it in and it's trapped in the mucus in your nose and then you've swallowed that mucus throughout the day. Or dermal exposure, so if your skin comes into contact with a substance, or a mixture of all of those things. And there's a saying in toxicology, which is the dose makes the poison. And it's just essentially meant to convey the idea that the amount of something you're exposed to determines how harmful it's going to be to you. So you can have something that's really, really toxic, but if you're never really exposed to any appreciable amount of it, then, you're probably going to be fine. Or similarly, if you have something non-toxic like water and you have a load of it all at once, you're probably going to do yourself quite a bit of harm, even although it's non-toxic. So it's this concept of controlling the dose of substances we're exposed to, which really helps us to manage risks, especially in scenarios like fire incidents, where we really don't have an awful lot of control over what's burning and how toxic the substances are that are being produced. So since we can't control how toxic or how dangerous those things are, the least that we can do is control how much of them we're exposed to in those situations. And we do that through things like PPE, breathing apparatus, etc. The thing is, it gets a little bit more complicated when we consider cancer and we think about the dose of carcinogens that firefighters are exposed to. Because in toxicological terms, cancer is a fair bit more complicated. It isn't an acute illness with just one clear mode of action. You're not going to go into a fire incident, come out a few hours later with cancer. It can take years for this cancer to appear, and it can take some very small, subtle biological changes in your body, the dysregulation of a single cell, say, to start that process off. And because of how complex it is and how those very small, subtle changes can play such a big part in cancer, you'll find most regulatory agencies, so the people who are responsible for assessing the risks of being exposed to chemicals, they'll all agree that there's generally considered to be no safe dose for carcinogens. And what's more, if you're repeatedly exposed, even to those very small, tiny doses of carcinogens, that makes developing cancer even more likely. That is essentially why we're so concerned about contamination. Fire incidents are a very obvious source of exposure. You can kind of see the big plume of smoke, the debris, etc. And in a way that makes it easier to control for, because you can kind of see it. So for example, by wearing PPE or breathing apparatus that prevents you from breathing those things in or touching them, etc. But what's far less obvious, and that's because we can't even always see these very small doses, is these contaminants that are comparatively easy to miss because of how small the doses are. And they settle out from smoke and debris onto PPE, equipment, appliances, on your hair, on your skin, etc. And as we've learned, it only takes those very small doses of contaminant or repeated exposure to those very small doses to potentially cause cancer. So essentially, that's why we've produced this decontamination guidance along with the FVU to try and tackle this very real problem of contamination. So you can find the guidance document here at this web link. It's on the FVU's Decon campaign page. The guide itself was produced through a process of reviewing the scientific literature. We collected together existing decontamination practices from various services in the UK. We also included a fair bit of the research that we've conducted at UCLan. So, for example, we ran a short indoor testing campaign to try and identify areas where contaminants are typically present within stations. And we also ran a large national survey which just assessed firefighters' experiences and opinions on issues around contamination and health. So the guidance's official title here is Minimizing Firefighters' Exposure to Toxic Fire Effluent. You can see that it's an interim kind of version, so we're still very much in the process of coming up with the final thing. So if you feel there's anything we need to pay particular attention to, then do get in touch. It also has a pretty extensive bibliography, so if you're just looking for a resource that kind of has a start in terms of extra reading, it's a good place to go. Just to mention a few sort of highlights from this guidance from some of the research that went into it. In the survey that we ran, we found that 4% of serving firefighters had developed cancer, and we were finding that younger firefighters, so people in their 30s, were developing cancers at a rate you would normally only expect to see for people in their 50s, say. The survey also found that relatively few firefighters had actually received any kind of cancer screening, and among those that did, they typically receive the standard age-related cancer screenings that are offered by the NHS, kind of to everyone. So given that we're finding younger people are getting diagnosed with cancer in the fire service, and given that there's kind of no requirement currently for firefighters to have any special screening or anything based on their job, it's really important to get yourself checked out if you're concerned, and to kind of advocate for yourself while we're still on this path to getting firefighters the recognition and the help that they need with this issue. In our indoor testing campaign, we found carcinogenic contaminants were present in several rooms of fire stations we tested, and this included some areas which should otherwise be clean, so things like dorm rooms and offices. PPE was also found to be a big source of contaminant exposure. So Professor Anna Steck has conducted studies which show how contaminants can remain on PPE after an incident. And our survey found some concerning practices are still relatively prevalent, and actually were associated with an increased risk of cancer. So these were things like storing your fire gloves inside other items of PPE, like inside your helmet or inside your boots or whatever. And then obviously when you come to put your helmet or your boots on, all those contaminants from the outside of your gloves have transferred to your helmet, and the skin, especially on your face and your head, is kind of a lot thinner and more permeable to these contaminants as well. So we found those kinds of practices were still happening. Other things we found: eating while wearing PPE or staying in PPE for an extended amount of time after an incident, failing to store clean and dirty PPE separately from each other, not changing out of PPE before re-entering the appliance cab. And I do think this is less of an issue these days, but our survey did still find people believing that wearing very heavily contaminated PPE is somewhat of a badge of honor, which is obviously a little less productive in terms of reducing exposure to contaminants. So the guidance document is full of best practice recommendations for targeting those sources of contamination. Just a few examples to pull out are things like having a very comprehensive decontamination procedure, which is carried out predominantly on site at the incident. So making sure all soiled PPE is bagged up and either collected by professional cleaning services on site, or stored in a dedicated area of the appliance for transport back to the station. Making sure to wipe skin down before leaving the incident, and actually to change into clean workwear before re-entering the appliance cab. Just trying to make every effort to keep that appliance cab as a clean area. Also having dedicated clean and dirty zones within the station, which control the passage of contaminants around the station, making sure they don't end up in dorms, offices, etc. Showering within an hour of return to the station, making sure skin and hair has been decontaminated. And obviously not storing soiled PPE in clean areas or in other items of PPE. So there's loads of recommendations in there. These are just, you know, a small handful that I pulled out. So you can have a look at the guidance if you think that'd be useful. It just aims to offer some solutions for tackling some of these practices, which we've found to still be prevalent in the service and may actually be associated with an increased risk of cancer. So we recommend all these practices are put in place essentially to break the transport of contaminants from incidents back to fire stations and back to homes. And we recommend that because these measures they're not only important for protecting the individual firefighter's health, but really the health of everyone that firefighter comes into contact with. And in that respect, you can really kind of think of decontamination as a community effort, because it's really not just the individual who's exposed to contaminants. When contaminants are brought back to the station or they're brought back to homes, then other people who weren't even at the incident are being exposed to contaminants as if they were. So yeah, decontamination isn't just about protecting your own health, it's about protecting the health of everyone around you. In, I guess, a similar sort of way to all these kind of COVID restrictions we've just come out of, which were designed to protect the health of the community. With that in mind, flexi-duty firefighters were a group that we found I think might need a special attention, because I know they don't always have the same facilities available to them. For example, they may not be able to go back to a station to shower before heading home. They may have to transport their soiled PPE in their own vehicles, etc. And in fact, some preliminary analysis from our survey suggests that this group of firefighters might actually be significantly more likely to develop cancer than other contract types for firefighters who can perhaps go back to a station for decontamination before they head home. So there's a section on flexi-duty firefighters and the guidance dedicated to this issue, but just to highlight them as a kind of higher risk for bringing contaminants home. So that was just a very kind of brief introduction to some of the work we're doing at UCLan, some of the resources that we're producing as a result of that work. And I just wanted to finish up by very briefly mentioning the cancer registry we have running. This is just another opportunity for us to collect that hard documented evidence that we need to affect change. It's essentially a place for firefighters to record their experiences with chronic illness, things like cancer, although you don't need to be suffering cancer or chronic illness to fill in the registry. You don't have to fill it in at all, just if you or others want to look at it, there it is. They can be found at that link. We're also planning on running a series of biological screening studies in firefighters, so essentially looking at the presence of contaminants in their bodies, which is just another link in that chain of evidence that we need so that we can show that not only are they exposed to these contaminants on their PPE and they're suffering these health conditions, but we can actually find them in their bodies and show that they are being absorbed and potentially causing all these health issues. So I just kind of wanted to round off by leaving our contact details here and to say that aviation firefighting is not actually something that we've explicitly covered yet. However, I know that the challenges and exposures, etc., faced in this sector are unique. So I just kind of wanted to leave our contact details here and to say that if there's anything you feel we should be looking at or that we can do in our research, then to reach out and get in touch with us. And we're more than happy to hear from you, and we'd really appreciate hearing from you actually. So thank you that very much for kind of listening to that brief presentation. I hope it was helpful.
Thanks, Taylor. I know when I spoke with Anna and you were there, she did mention that up to now aviation hadn't been considered, but that it was something that was on a radar to look at.
Sorry, Luton.
Hi, Paul.
Hiya. Do you mind if I just punt out a quick question?
Yeah, feel free.
Taylor or David, this is something that's very close to my heart, and we've been doing some extra work here at Luton anyway. But one of my concerns at the moment is, and I don't know if there's been any testing into this, is we've just recently bought brand new kit for all our teams. We've gone for quite a high spec, but I've heard on the grapevine that sometimes it's what's on the outside of that ensemble that can be transmitted. It's a long chain chemical to keep the water out. Is there something that you're aware of?
Do you happen to mean PFAS chemicals, perfluorinated?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so that is something that we're aware of. There has been a lot of research, again in the US is where the majority of this research that I'm aware of is being done at the moment, because it's also something that was a component of firefighting foams.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so I'm not aware of a lot being done in terms of PPE at the moment, but it's definitely something that needs a bit more attention, because there's a more established a body of evidence in terms of the links between PFAS chemicals and health conditions, because there have been several exposure incidents, again in the US, where these kinds of chemicals have gotten into drinking water, etc. And they're very persistent. They stick around for a long time. I don't know of a lot going on in the UK yet, but it's definitely worth being concerned about.
Sure. Yeah.
I can add a few things if you like as well. We've kind of been involved with this quite heavily with the PFAS issue. We helped with the UK screening of the film Dark Waters, which kind of made the public aware of the PFAS scandal. And we've held a series of workshops with DEFRA and through the Royal Society of Chemistry as well, which I've chaired, to look specifically at the risks from PFAS. You're right, they're on a lot of your clothing because they're brilliant chemicals for water resistance. When they're actually on your clothing, they're not too much of an issue to you. PFAS are just fantastic at being kind of tightly bound. Where they're more of an issue kind of going out into the environment is, I guess, from your clothing from 50 years time when it's put in a landfill site. The main risk for firefighters that you'll have will be those historic foams that you've used, like the 3M Light Waters. That again, they're fantastic foams. They do a great job, but the stuff that comes off them is pretty nasty. Again, where they're involved, they really tightly stick to surfaces and can get in drinking water as well. So the drinking water is kind of an issue to, again, sometimes not specifically firefighters, but the wider area as well. They can get into drinking water resources, and we're finding that's now become quite an issue, specifically in the UK. UK drinking water are now in a little bit of a panic because we're finding quite high levels in drinking water, and they're looking to address that. Again, I think from a firefighter's perspective, again, it's about doing that decontamination, trying to get the stuff off you. You mentioned something about the surfaces as well. I see that as a real kind of exposure pathway for you. You've got the equipment, but then if you take it off with grubby hands and you've got the stuff on your hands and then have a sandwich. I used to do quite a lot of site work, and I was terrible for doing that. You've got all this protective equipment on, you go and handle contaminated land stuff, and then you take your equipment off to get in your cab to have a sandwich, and before you know it, you've got all the stuff on your food, and you've taken it in that way. So kind of having something on hand quickly for short-term decontamination's really useful to reduce your exposure. And then as we heard from the previous talk, great advice to kind of not take that contamination back into your workplace as well. That can be a real issue. For airports specifically as well, we've been doing quite a bit of work. Organophosphates are a real issue around aircraft, and there's compounds called tricresyl phosphates that we've seen a real issue with, specifically with flight crew, but there's also going to be a risk to people kind of working on the apron as well. These things are in the aviation oils. So you've got issues of those in the atmosphere, as well as your PFAS, as well as dioxins and PAHs that we'd seen in the previous talk as well. So there's quite a specific cocktail in the aviation industry that, yeah, definitely needs some thought, I think.
Okay, well, thanks for that. This makes it sound like a really risky business to be in.
There's a lot of sources. It's all about trying to mitigate and reduce that risk. So again, that best practice guidance that you've seen from UCLAN, and having access to, I think, quick decontamination to just try and make it as safe as possible. When you start looking at these things when there's all these toxic chemicals, we say, like, with the cancer causing ones, like the lowest dose, there is no safe dose. But a lot of people like barbecue food, a lot of people like burnt toast. You get your PAHs and your carcinogens through that as well. So again, to echo the previous talk, it's all about trying to control that dose and reduce your exposure, especially when it's through your occupation. That shouldn't be like a lifestyle choice. You should be protected and try and find ways to do that as safely as possible, I think.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thanks, David.
Particularly from an aviation point of view, I'm just wondering what sort of David and Taylor think about the sort of location of stations with regards to their proximity to taxiways and, sort of exhaust fumes and things like rubber debris off tyres mixed with de-icing fluid and things like that getting into the station. I wonder if that's something that they would have considered as a sort of adding to the cocktail of possible carcinogens that could be getting onto stations, particularly at airports.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. We did a bit of an investigation in the South African airport where we went around to do some non-targeted analysis to try and nail down some specific areas of hotspot pollution. And you've mentioned a few there that have been specifically an issue. So where there's those taxi points, normally before the aircraft takes off as well, they'll do a bit of an engine check. So you'll get an absolute blast of stuff coming out then. As I mentioned, the tricresyl phosphates present in the oils, you're likely to have an increased area of those there. The PAHs, again, will come from that combustion of the oils and fuels coming out the back of your engine. There's been a few VOCs as well. We've found elevated concentrations of things like toluene, BTEX, again, associated with fuels. So having those areas of ventilation can be quite important. But then again, you've got to be careful. You don't want to let the air in you don't want it to accumulate. It needs to kind of come out as well. So I feel like each airport's going to have its own kind of specific areas that might be more of a risk than others, but you've definitely identified a few areas which would be likely hotspots. The fire testing areas again are another specific hotspot for your really nasty stuff like your dioxins and your PFAS as well.
Thanks, David. Kieran, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, John. Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for the opportunity, John, and for organising this morning's event. I'm sure everybody's really appreciative of what you've managed to pull together. I suppose the question really is more of an offer, really, to Anna following the presentation you just provided. Obviously, up at Wharton in Preston, Lancashire, where we're relatively close geographically to UCLan. And I'm very interested in how we could perhaps look at some work streams to further the research from an aviation perspective, to provide some more information for the aviation sector from a fire service viewpoint with the specific risks that we're likely to face, which in most cases should be known knowns. We should have an idea of what the risks are that we face before we turn up. So it's an open offer, really, and I'll get in touch after this presentation today to see what we can do that might aid everybody in the sector.
Thanks, Kieran. Mark, would you just want to speak to the meeting?
Yeah, sure. I'll just, listening to the last couple of points, regarding, other opportunities for contamination. I'm thinking this is not just about fire. This is about everyone that's working out there, buzzing around in Land Rover on the airfield, yellow lights on top and stuff, getting close to aprons, getting close to this, that, and the other. I just think this is becoming and quite rightly, a much broader discussion rather than, and I use the word just fire, in inverted commas. That's the way I'm starting to think.
Yeah, agreed. Taylor, one of the points you made about the flexi duties, are you referring to flexi duty officers, or are you referring to returned on call? Kieran, for example, is on call with Cheshire Fire Service. It's not his fault, but he is. But are you referring to on call and flexis, or specifically just flexis? Because they're both in the same boat. I've done both. Going on with dirty kit. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, Taylor and David.
Just referring to flexis in terms of the results from that survey, yeah, similar issues faced are probably going to cause similar problems in terms of bringing contaminants home. We have lots of variables in this survey to kind of look at, and so it's just preliminary results at the moment, but I think that finding is definitely one which points to having less access, if you will, to these kind of decontamination facilities compared to someone who's able to go back to a station, shower, change, doesn't necessarily have to transport their PPE in the vehicle that they're going to be using. So yeah, just flexis in terms of the results of that survey, but I think the kind of reasoning behind it is applicable to on-call as well.
Okay, thank you. David, in terms of the airport, you said you'd done some work. Was that large airport, small airport?
It wasn't the main one in Johannesburg. It was a kind of one of the smaller ones. They had, I think, single digits to kind of 10 or so international flights size aircraft that would come in, but a lot of it was kind of smaller aircraft that would come in and about. And so we're probably underestimating the risks on that aircraft. If you look at on that airport, sorry, if you look at a much bigger, busier airport with a lot more going on, then yeah, I think the levels were going to be a lot higher and much more potential for risk there, really.
My thoughts on it is, obviously, I know the amount of people in the room, but close to you, I know that Neil Gillenship at Manchester's in the meeting. I'm just thinking whether it might be something to look at from the industry. For example, using Manchester or Liverpool, one of the local ones to you at Manchester Met, to give some kind of a benchmark as to what you found. That would then feed into Mark's getting the message out to a wider audience. Neil, just wondering if you wanted to comment.
Morning, John. Yeah, absolutely, David. You're more than welcome to come in anytime. So we'll swap details afterwards and come on down and have a look. And I totally agree and echo what Mark's saying. I think it's not just about fire; it's the wider audience. As and when we do pitch out to any incident, we're joined by, I'll say, multi-agencies, not in the normal sense. I'm talking about airfield operations, airfield security, etc. So yeah, it'd be good to discuss.
David, just a thought, and because I'm mindful we've got a few guests in. So John is in Dubai, we've got Edgar and team, and Adrian and Nikki from Gibraltar, and we've got Robert in Malta. In terms of, like, you know, the nasties, you know, that you've been talking about, you know, the polycyclic aromatics, etc. Does significant atmospheric temperatures change the volatility, etc.? You know, I'm mindful we don't get the temperatures that they do abroad. Does that change the risk profile as well?
I'd imagine so. I think anyone that's kind of been away to these nice places on a hot day, you can just see the tarmac shimmering, and you smell the difference. So yeah, that the hotter temperatures are going to make these compounds more volatile. A lot of them are in that semi-volatile range, so increasing that temperature a little bit is going to increase your potential for inhalation exposure, really, which is a more difficult one to mitigate against. When you've got that dermal exposure, you're able to kind of wash and get things off easier. But trying to cut that inhalation pathway when you're just walking around an area might be a little bit trickier, I think.
Echoing Taylor's words, is there anything you'd specifically like to sort of pass on to the meeting in terms of protection, or your thoughts for going forward?
Yeah, definitely. Again, I'd like to just offer support to the guys at UCLan as well, like Taylor. If we can help with anything equipment-wise, we've got a new GC triple quadrupole mass spectrometer, which is pretty much the best instrument in the world for analysing low levels of pollutants, not just your PAHs, but your dioxins as well. And we're setting up PFAS methods. And we're more than happy to collaborate with other people. It'd be great to get some bodies, I think, really, to kind of do this work justice, and kind of get people in to work with us to do that. So our facilities are always open, always really happy to collaborate with anybody. So please do feel free to reach out and talk to us about anything. From the work we've been doing, again, we just keep seeing all of these chemicals popping up. We talked about kind of controlling the risks. That's where I've been, I think, really fortunate to work with the guys from DWIPE and kind of test how effective some of these mitigation measures are, especially when we looked at the effectiveness of their wipe. That performed really, really well. I think we're able to remove plus kind of 90-95% of PAHs and dioxins from the skin, and the shampoo seemed to work really effectively as well. But I think just being aware and washing with something. Water is not particularly effective, so I know some of us just kind of do like a token hand wash under the water. These compounds are lipophilic, they like oil, they stick to the oiliness of your skin, and the water just goes straight off. So you need to use something more effective than just water alone. Again, alcohol wipes, normally they're kind of the things you might have around, not the greatest thing to use. Alcohol is polar, much more like water. So again, that's just going to kind of rub stuff off. It can make matters worse as well, because it can open the pores in your skin, and you end up kind of just rubbing dirt into your skin rather than removing it. So using something else, the DWIPE ones worked really well when we did it, but having that kind of thorough washing and procedures in place can help, I think, reduce your risks. We've done some great lab experiments, but I'd be really interested to see kind of how effective these things are in the field as well. You saw from the report just some of the images of just how much stuff can be removed with wipes. So yeah, the offers there. Really want to thank you for letting me be involved with this, and if we can help with anything, please do reach out and contact us. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Can you invite James?
Morning, John. Morning, everybody. A couple of things I was just wanting to mention to the group here. We're talking about controlling the risks here. Surely the optimal way of controlling the risk is removing the risk. Within the airport fire service, as we all know, our primary exposure to any contaminants is in a training context. And that obviously is a very controllable context, unlike a real operational shout, which luckily for us happen very rarely. So there's certainly something we can do in terms of looking at how we conduct training, but also we can look at the frequency of the practical firefighting training we do, and look at the regulatory minima for that. And obviously, John, this ties in with what you do in relation to the incident command training and fire studio and so on. There's other ways of skinning the training cat that don't involve exposure to contaminants at all. So I think that's a really important thing to consider. The other thing I think I'd like to mention is that we need to also think about the liability issues here. Because the exposure is in a training context and in a controlled and understood context, that liability clearly sits with the employer. If a line can be traced back to continued exposure following, a cancer diagnosis. So I think there's quite a lot that needs to be done in the background here, and part of it would, I think, logically involve discussions with the regulator about the reality of the risk as well. And this is much more of an existential thing for RFF. Planes don't crash very often. So I think in many ways we overtrain for a particular focused scenario or set of scenarios. And that is where the exposure is happening to our people. So there's much to think about.
Thanks, James. I have a question, David.
Can I just add quickly on the back of that one with the training? I don't know how many people use the fluorinated foam still, but there are some really good fluorine-free alternatives. I know National Foam have been working hard to develop fluorine-free alternatives. So even from just training purposes, switching to those would likely really cut down your exposure of PFAS and be good for the environment at the same time as well.
Just a quick one for you, David. Obviously, something that is used regularly are smoke machines using, ours used to be vegetable oil. And it's obviously, you can walk around in it. It's not full of the same nasties. But I just wonder what your take is on those. What, have you done any work in looking at training smoke?
I've not at all, actually. I don't know if Taylor's done anything of more use. Again, I'd expect to have, as you rightly said, not the super nasties, but there'd be some unpleasant things in there. Some of the things we've looked at a little bit more have been when we come to kind of like household fires and burning household materials, where you've got other flame retardants that are already in there, and you can get some pretty nasty things coming out of them. I don't know what alternatives there are for smoke, or trying to find a safer smoke to use, I'm afraid.
Okay. Yeah, no, it was just a thought. I know that pretty much everybody in the meeting will use, smoke machines at some point, and been in and out of them for many, many years. So, Taylor, are you aware of anything?
I'm not, I'm sorry, but it definitely sounds like something worth study, especially because, as has already been mentioned, these are going to be repeated exposures. So even, if they are inherently less toxic, if you're being exposed to them on a much more regular basis, that, could potentially still cause you a fair bit of harm. So, sorry, I don't know of any study specifically, but it definitely sounds worth investigating.
Okay, thanks. The machine you mentioned, David, or the equipment you've got, would that be able to look at the synthetic smoke and give some sort of take on how that come across?
Yeah, definitely. We're more than happy to kind of collaborate with people on this stuff. We're getting a loan of an instrument, I think early next year, which is specifically designed to kind of capture and measure those volatile components. So we could even do a few little kind of proof of concept experiments, if you like, just to try and test that smoke, put it through our instrument and see what we get, because they're absorbent filters, so you can put those filters out. We probably wouldn't need to do it for too long with your smoke, and then hook it up to the instrument and see what we get. But I assume Taylor's got access to similar instrumentation,
Okay.
So between us, more than happy to collaborate, and we can try and test a few little things. It's always very difficult to do a comprehensive study without any kind of financial backing, which is always the difficult thing.
Yeah.
But we can definitely have a quick look see and see if it's something that's worth trying to secure further funding to look at it in more detail.
Okay. Neil?
Just a quick one from me, David, whilst you're still here, and I suppose for Taylor as well, is have we reached out to the manufacturers of any of these products, particularly in the lines of foam, and what responsibility do they now have? Obviously, the liability sort of falls with us with the more and more information that we're receiving and the updates around the dangers associated with these. But what's their responsibility, and where do they sit now in terms of liability?
Yeah, so I've collaborated with National Foam, and the last 5 years they've had a real push towards fluorine free. One of the reasons they hadn't shifted as much to fluorine free as they would have liked was US military demands the best of the best of the best, and the best of the best of the best is unfortunately at the moment still fluorine. They're now developing products which are working pretty much as well as the fluorine free ones. I think there's a market shifting towards, the more we kind of demand these fluorine free alternatives, the more industry will react to that. When I've been speaking to the guys there, they seem like really nice people that want to help and make things safer for everybody. So I think there's the appetite from the individuals, if we can get more of a commercial drive behind it as well, to say we want this stuff. I think that'll only help.
Yeah, it's just a quick one. Obviously, we're spread all over the place, and it's maybe a question for David and Taylor. It's not practical for them to come to every airport, or for every airport to come to them. Would they be able to maybe produce or come up with a list of maybe recommended further education institutes or people that they collaborate with, that are more sort of local to, for example, Glasgow or whatever, that we can then contact them for the likes of inviting them on station for checking sort of air quality, cross-contamination, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, sure. I can try and link you up with regional contacts. I guess just because you're in Scotland, I wouldn't say it's not worth collaborating with us. I've got students in Canada doing stuff, collaborators in South America, South Africa doing stuff. So we're more than happy to we can send you, I guess, materials to collect samples with, and train you on how to use them properly, and then you send the samples back to us. But yeah, more than happy to widely collaborate with people. You don't have to just be around the corner for us to be able to work effectively with you. And I imagine Taylor would say the same.
Yeah, I think if that's the case, then certainly I'll sort of drop you a line then, so that we're working with you.
Please do.
That's great. Thank you.
So one of the reasons for me inviting Alistair Cooper, all of you know Alistair from Terberg, is there's probably nobody better to know what's out in the industry in terms of phones and equipment. So that's one of the reasons Alistair's here. So Alistair, thoughts?
Morning, John, everyone. Thanks for the invite. But just, I suppose, back to Neil's question, why is the industry still producing foams that maybe aren't as friendly as David's suggesting? Well, people keep buying it, and the legislator allows it to be sold. So until the demand from the marketplace ceases from the end customer, then the product at the moment is still being sold. C8 is obviously pretty much gone, apart from legacy stock. C6 looks as if it's going to be outlawed in 5 years' time. Why we need to wait 5 years, I really don't need to know. But as a customer, as long as you keep buying it, the manufacturers are going to keep selling it. So unfortunately, the brutal reality is here, you have the call as a customer buying the product. If you stop buying it, they'll stop making it, because it's purely a demand led industry, folks. So stop buying it and move to fluorine free and more friendly product, and then the market will stop manufacturing it. So
thanks, Alistair. Kevin McDermott, Glasgow.
Good morning. Just a quick one. It's more back to the sort of training aspect of what we do. We've probably significantly reduced recently the amount of carbonaceous training exercises that we do, with a move more to obscuration masks where possible, and then within the aircraft rig, it is LPG scenarios that we're using. Should we be looking at sort of decontamination, and are we still at an increased risk with the LPG fires as opposed to the old-fashioned sort of carbonaceous fires?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, unsure about doing the test actually. We found with different fires produce different chemicals depending on kind of what you put in as that fuel. the temperature of it will dictate what chemicals you get on the outside of it. I'd very much expect you to still get your PAHs. And I guess without kind of testing them, it's difficult for me to say which one's nastier than the other one, really. But yeah, I don't think they'll be completely safe. There'll still be nasty chemicals in there. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't know on the composition or amounts without testing.
Would that be something possibly if you were looking at, like with Neil at Manchester, you know, a quick sort of field test on that?
Yeah, again, I guess I've just got to be a bit careful saying yes. I'll quickly field test everything for everybody before I know it. I've got 200 samples to run through, and the university is screaming at me for running everything at a loss. So yeah, I guess kind of prioritizing what we'd like to do, what we can do for free, and then if there's the appetite for it, trying to get some funding to actually do, as I said, do this work justice and investigate it in the detail needed. We've got some great match funded schemes at the university at the moment where we put in kind of 50% of the cost of a PhD student. There's knowledge transfer partnerships as well, which are a good kind of government backed scheme if we want a researcher to do stuff. So I guess maybe it's a discussion that maybe me and Taylor can have. We can chat about how from academia we can help supply some source of funding and support, and see what's feasible for what we've got and what facilities we've got, really.
Okay. Mark Buckingham, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on a point that I think Alastair made, which is really, really valid. I mean, I think as an aviation part of the fire industry, we're actually pretty advanced in terms of our use of non-fluorinated foams. The problem is in the bigger part of the fire market, which would include your industrials and your oil and gas. But the jury's out, because actually, I know Paul's on the call from Joy, I'm sure you'll bear me out on this. The challenge in those industries is the actual technical capability of the foam in things such as storage tanks, because it's a slightly different ballgame in terms of getting the foam actually onto the fire for various reasons. There's various reasons why there's a lot of pushback from that part of the fire market, and that probably is one of the reasons why we've still, you know, putting pressure on the manufacturer to actually overcome that issue, because at the moment they've not got much of a choice. Now, of course, European regs are certainly affecting the use of fluorinated foams, but that's probably part of the reason we've got the demand. But as an aviation industry, I truly believe we've got no excuse to not go this route.
Thanks, Mark. I know you said you've got to go around now, haven't you, David? So
apologies. I'm now 1 minute late. My students are probably all.
I'll let you go.
If I don't get there within 2 minutes, they'll probably all leave.
Okay. So
thank you so much for letting me be involved. Again, please pass on my contact details, and it'd be great to speak to people in more detail.
Thanks for your time,
thanks everyone,
on behalf of the meeting. Cheers, David. Thank you.
Bye.
So I've got hands up from Keith Atkins.
Good morning, all. I don't know if there's any AFERA committee members in the group, but as for funding, is this something we could approach them with the sample testing, like with David there? Just wondering that, is there maybe an avenue we can actually explore, because to the benefit of the us in the aviation world?
So Simon was supposed to be joining the meeting, Simon Petts. Mark's obviously here from Birmingham and in his role as AOA. So that's perhaps a discussion that Mark and Simon could have. I'll let Mark answer that one as well. Mark, thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I just thought exactly the same thing. I mean, in terms of funding, I'm not sure exactly where the AOA is in terms of having some spare bumps to do such things. It doesn't quite work that way, but AFERA is a potential. So, I mean, Simon's my co-chair in the AOA. I'll have a chat with him about the aspect. I'm sure he'll be just as passionate as we all are on this topic. So I think it's well worth raising the question, because I don't think there'll be anybody across the whole airport community that pushes back against it.
Okay. Dave Taggart.
Thanks, John. Morning, everyone. It's just to echo what Keith just said there, and for Mark and their forward moving forward. Obviously, we can all come on. It's a 2-hour call. We can speak all day about this. I know there's an AFOA conference the second week of December. I think it's something to keep a battle rhythm going that we need to come forward and see whether we can collectively do a coordinated response, and whether a working group comes from this rather than yourself pick up, keep the momentum going, John, or all of us work as silos. We've all probably got information that we could share, and it's just about now keeping this momentum going, and hopefully if we can achieve it through a FOA.
Yeah. Martin?
Yeah, so I put it that someone mentioned a FOA, and like I say, it's because local authority probably support the findings of reports and testing. Airports are private companies. Bringing people in to test to identify risk to employees, that's going to be first hurdle, getting someone on site, because the litigation from that, if it's proved you're forcing someone to train, it's causing cancer later down the line, you can just imagine ramifications of that. But I think raising it through AOA, a FOA, and regulator, asking the questions, then companies are obviously going to have to get on board with it and work together on it. Again, working in silos, there's no, it's got to be a uniform front and looked at it specifically. The busier airports, whatever's happening there is obviously going to be the same results, but on a lower scale, the less movements you have. So if the risk's there, the risk's there.
Yeah, it's a good point, Martin. Keith?
Yeah, sorry, John. John, you mentioned earlier that one airport has a sort of a policy procedure in place with addressing the contamination and things like that. As we sort of arranged with the ICS working group, it was, as everyone says, not working in a silo independently.
Yeah.
The sharing of information, is that a possibility? As you know, we're a smallest airport, not a large or part of a working group. Is that something that could happen?
Yeah, one or two sites I've got policies, but I know certainly, and John's in the meeting, John Trott, Leonardo, I've done quite a bit of work. Of the returns that I got, the return from Leonardo was the most comprehensive of any of the returns that have come in. John, do you want to comment to the meeting?
Yeah, we're more than happy to share what we've done. I think, was the return done by Neil, John?
Yes, it was, John. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Neil's not in the meeting today. He's on holiday, but yeah, more than happy to share what we've done so far.
Basically, for example, one of the questions that I asked was about the understanding of enhanced PPE, and some have done that, some have done some work on that, and then there's others who don't know anything about it as such. I know that John, down at Leonardo there, you've now got the enhanced flashers, haven't you? I know that's one element because we were talking about it when I went down.
The particulate filter flashers, and we've also got the D-White products now for all staff to use after fire training.
Okay. Mark?
John, can I just... Hi there, John Trotsky.
Hi, Keith.
Hi, mate. Your policy, does it cover also the training aspect, or is it just mainly incident related?
It's mainly at the moment training.
Okay.
But I'm more than happy to share that, Keith.
Yeah, okay. I'll let John Lord sort of arrange that and maybe disseminate it throughout the group. Thank you, John.
Yeah, great.
Okay, no worries, Keith. Thanks, John. Just to answer Keith then, one of the things that I've looked to set up, because I've obviously been getting documents from across the world on this, different studies, the Swedish studies, the American studies. We were going to have a rep coming in from Australia, Pete McMahon, but it is night time, so I'm guessing that the clocks got missed, so he's going to give us an Australian perspective. I'm going to ask my IT to set up just a SharePoint folder where we can load all these different things into, and then I'll just ping that out as a link to everybody. You can just go in and download all this stuff, or I can speak to Simon and Mark if they've got a repository for it to go. I'm not doing this for anything other than getting it out to you. So anybody got any further questions at that point before I move forward? Right. Obviously, Jamie's here from DY. I did an interview for them, just talking about my own personal journey. Jamie, if there's anything you want to add before we move on, anything that you found with your work with DY. Jamie's a serving firefighter himself, so I'll just invite Jamie to speak for a minute.
John, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I suppose I probably just want to say a little bit about where we've come from and where we are now. When we set up DWIPE, there was the simple aim was just to provide an effective solution to reduce exposure to cancer-causing contaminants that are found within firefighting industry and wider industry. We didn't really know how far or how big it was going to be. Just we knew that there was a risk from what had been going on around the rest of the world. At that point, I was actually working within Bedfordshire and trying to find a solution that was a UK-based one. So it kind of all tied in together. We only had 3 criteria, which was one, that had to be scientifically proven to remove 95% plus of contaminants. 2, it had to be environmentally friendly, biodegradable. And 3, most importantly, it had to be a cost-effective solution. We've been able to do that. And the aviation industry is kind of been overlooked into the level exposure that you guys go through. The arrogance of, if you like, of a local authority that think they're exposed to greater amounts of contaminants, they're not. The level of fires that the local authorities will attend compared to the amount of training that you guys do, your exposure to live fire scenarios is greater than their exposure to actual fires. So we want to be able to help you reduce those risks. I'll go back to local authority, an incident, they've got the primacy, so they're ultimately accountable for any risk that people are exposed to. For yourselves as senior officers, you're ultimately accountable for the training and the exposure that your crews are exposed to through training. Our products will assist you in reducing any risk that you've got. We've worked with Manchester Metropolitan to ensure that all of the products that we've got do exactly what we need them to do, and that is actually just remove that risk as much as possible. If you're looking at Public Health England guidance on exposure to contaminants, they'll always just use remove, which is remove the contaminant, remove the clothing, and then further remove the risk. We do that through, you'll be removing the PPE, our wipes will then further remove the risk, and then lastly, the hair and body wash will reduce that risk further by 95% of whatever contaminant was on you, then removed.
Right, thanks, Jamie. I've also got another speaker, Abby Hanna. Abby has a degree in biomedical science. Just whether there's anything you want to add, Abby, to the meeting on transmission routes or sort of transfer of risk. Any thoughts you've got listening in?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Abby Hanna. As John mentioned, I've been working alongside the Fire and Rescue Services for over 6 years now. I specialise in research and development of technologies for firefighter protection, mainly in PPE. So I know people have mentioned kind of enhanced PPE. That's kind of the area I work in. Over the last 5 years, I've done a lot of work throughout the US and Canada on research and working with firefighter consultants there. As Taylor said, the US is much further ahead in creating legislation and areas of interest and completing research for this. Canada also has legislation now, and Australia. So Europe is kind of working towards it, and the UK, but we're definitely behind in those areas. From listening to the discussion, as Taylor mentioned, the causal link between contaminants and cancer is complicated, and there are variables which play a part in increasing your exposure, and lots of them. So the areas I've looked at is decreasing or finding solutions to this in the fire attack stage, the overhaul stage, the decontamination at the station stage, which I guess is where DWIPE would come in, firefighter PPE. So there's areas which can be enhanced that aren't right now, but luckily there's the PPE you wear right now. It is designed to protect against chemicals, viruses, and because of this, as a happy coincidence, it also protects against particulates. The jacket and the trousers has membranes within it, which protects you. So it wasn't necessarily designed to protect against particulates at the time, but as a happy coincidence, because you've got protection from all of these other things, it also is protecting you from that direct exposure. Diesel exhaust fumes has also been discussed, and exhaust fumes from airports and aeroplanes, and also just general wellness. We look into kind of wellness, exposure documents, also cancer related testing that can be done, and general fitness, smoking, things like that, other areas of wellness within your life that can decrease your risk. I think that's it.
Okay, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to move on now, just to sort of give people a bit of it's more of a personal insight, but it's a couple of lessons learned. I'm not going to bore you with it too much with the detail. I'm passionate about cancer. Many of you know me quite well. I've worked with a lot of you, and what was an eye-opener for me was the approach that the health service has to cancer. Why I'm passionate about it, you saw on the presentation from Taylor, up near the top was prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. My concern, as I mentioned early on, was taking things home, and my wife actually got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma a year before my prostate cancer diagnosis. They're really just things to sort of put on your radar for you and your teams. The health service in relation to prostate cancer, so I know from my journeys around the UK and overseas that the aviation fire service is predominantly a middle-aged service to older end. There's a preponderance of people who are approaching 50 or over 50, and the risk matrix changes. So the testicular cancer up to 45, and then it changes over to prostate. It's very rare testicular beyond 45, and prostate being dangerous in so much as it's like a silent assassin. Only this morning I read of another actor who was died with stage 4 prostate cancer at 59. The one thing that you'll hear doctors say to you quite regularly is, if you're going to have cancer, prostate cancer is the one to have. Trust me, it isn't. It's nothing to do with how virulent it is. The younger you are, it tends to be more aggressive. I've sat on a cancer ward with lots of people who have had it. From a personal perspective, the cancer itself doesn't bother me. The effects of the operation and other elements definitely do. There are consequences to it. And the surgery, that's no big deal. They're practiced at it. They do it well. But the other treatments, again, can have effects. They have effects on you. They have effects on your family. And it's about not sleepwalking into it. Of all the others, you'll get signs and indicators, but with prostate, you don't get signs and indicators. I had enlarged prostate before I left the fire service, and they monitored it, and then they forgot. And after 2 years, they did a PSA test, and my PSA was well over the cancer referral levels. I've had altogether now 7 operations. Should only have been 1, but with complications. However, you still run into doctors saying it's the one to have, but it isn't. It's the second biggest killer because it's silent. So what I'm saying to all of you, as I say, I know most of you, don't sleepwalk into a situation. Don't be frightened of going to the doctors and talking about it. And one of the things why I pushed the survey, and I really want to make this point to you all, I belong to a group on Facebook, which is Firefighters with Cancer. I asked a question of them, how many of you have got wives, partners, etc., who have suffered with cancer at the same time as you? The numbers were staggering, absolutely staggering. I have some real mind-blowing stories from people. On that same group, you saw the list from Taylor. On that same group, I know firefighters who've got not just one form of cancer, but multiple forms of cancer. And it opened my eyes. I thought I knew quite a lot about prostate cancer and other cancers. COVID has had an impact, but please don't be shy. I know somebody who their doctor would not give them a PSA test. It's not the most accurate, and they sort of argue against giving it you. But once you're over 48, certainly keep a close eye on it. Other things will show you quicker. Prostate is a silent killer. But as I say, you do run into a mindset in the health service of, well, it's the one to have, and it isn't. I lost a friend within 15 months. He was 48 when he was diagnosed. He was diagnosed the same week as me, and he died within 15 months. It moved into his spine. They told him he was in remission. He moved into his spine and he was dead within 5 months. They give him 2 years to live and it killed him within 5 months. So be vigilant for yourselves, be vigilant for your staff. The people under 45, the youngsters, the testicular cancer risk is significant because the 2 points of entry that this research has shown is the neck and the groin. And certainly, again, I've got plenty of colleagues from local authority who have had things removed because of testicular cancer. And a statistic that I just want to share with you all, just so that you can, you know how real this is. I belonged to a watch in 1984. Of those that are left out of 17, 11, including myself, 11 have had cancer, got cancer. All different ones, but the 6 was with prostate. That gives you just an idea of how prevalent it is. So that's just a sort of a personal reflection on why I wanted to push this. And as I said, the risk to your families, it's absolutely there. My wife used to say, when you come in from work, you stink. And days later, I'd be blowing snot that were black. The kitchen had stink from whatever I'd been to. Admittedly, we were really busy back then, and we were wearing beer and going into a lot of fires. And I were an idiot because as a boss, I used to follow my BA teams in when I should have been stood outside. I learnt the hard way. But I just wanted to share that kind of personal side to you. The risk is real, and I think the risk will be shown to be real to your families as well. And for the people who are on call as well as aviation, I know in the aviation industry, there are many, many people who are on-call firefighters with the local authority as well as in aviation fire and rescue. The difficulties for them is they're going to go out from their houses, they're going to get stinky and horrible and drive back home in the car and go back into their house because the practicalities are extremely difficult. I'd like to just jump back to Alistair Cooper, just to see if Alistair's got any thoughts about clean cab concepts or anything else that Alistair might be aware of. It's fine if you're not, Alistair, but just your thoughts.
No, John, it's a topic that's been looked at, primarily driven in the US at the moment, John, with the likes of Pierce and the main manufacturers over there. They've taken SCBA out of the cabin now in a lot of applications. They've gone to washout cabs. A lot of fire services now, municipal services, actually do not return their crews in the appliance. They have a minibus comes and picks them up and everything else. So there's lots going on, but it's mainly driven around litigation. And obviously the US federal government have now adopted the disability as was touched on earlier on and recognising it, whereas we don't have in the UK. Emergency One has done some filtration equipment, positive cab filtration equipment that's retrofittable to some domestic appliances in the UK. The ARF trucks that are in the UK at the moment, the new variants from Rosenbauer and Oshkosh predominantly are washed down, cleaned down vehicles. Interesting, nobody's ever asked the question, what chemicals can we use to wash and clean down our cabins? So I'm sure Jez will be sending an email this afternoon to ask the question. But we're trying to facilitate it as a manufacturer. There is an elephant in the room, without any doubt, and that's around cost and round about how we take these things forward. That as a manufacturer of vehicles outside the fire industry, we don't have these challenges, but we're very attuned to it. We try and make things as standard as possible rather than options. John, I think we've got to do more self-help. To be honest, the businesses aren't going to spend the money, and we've really got to try and do as much as we can and be self-helping at this stage to make the world that you guys work in safer. I send all my staff, up until the start of COVID, for annual PSA testing privately. So, you know, it's one thing that, again, it doesn't have to be through the NHS, and it's maybe one thing you could lean on your employers to do, is to fund, you know, private testing or something like that as part of a benefit, as an employment benefit. I know 1 or 2% in your pay envelopes is important, but your health's maybe more important, and maybe health screening as part of your benefits program may be something worth really pushing for. And again, maybe that's something that, you know, an organisation like AFOA could try and come up with a reduced rate with Bupa or something in the UK to try and encourage that. But we'll do everything we can, John, and we'll keep feeding back anything that we see, John, to the industry.
Thanks, Alistair. I've said what I want to say for now. As I mentioned, I've got quite a lot of documents from all over the world. Some of them are wittering on and don't really say a lot. But my plan is to put them into some kind of place where we can distribute them. So for people who have got policies, if you're happy to share them, again, if you mail them to me, I'll put them in the same, and then people can look and cherry pick the best parts, if you will, to come up with their own. I don't think we need to be precious. The ICS working group that we set off, as Keith said, the idea was to stop the silos, and that's the reason for me pushing this meeting today. I wouldn't like to see any of you going through what I went through a few years ago. Paul Allen.
Hi, John. Thanks for that. You've just mentioned something that I think is vitally important here. I think everybody's happy to come out of the silo and share what they've got. I've got a few things that I've been working on and quite happy to put into the pot. But what I would ask the audience here is, if you cherry picked from it and you make up an even better document, could you put it back in so that we could all have a look? Because obviously we are working in isolation, and it would be very beneficial to the whole group to get the best policy that gives a good standard across the aviation business. From part of everything we've gone through today, it sounds like there's a huge mountain to climb, but there's a lot of little things here we can do and put in place whilst we're waiting for the big stuff to come along, like the testing and what have you. So I think it's very important to ensure that we have these clean and dirty areas, and ensuring our guys clean their kit. And as Taylor said earlier on, it was a badge of honour to have a real filthy kit to prove that you've been out in the thick of it. And it's taken me a while to educate my guys to make sure that they get their kit in after use and get it cleaned. And there's many other things that I'm working on, but I just thought the important part here was that if we're all going to start dipping into these documents, then if you come up with a good policy, pop it back into the pot and we can all have a look at it.
Thanks, Paul. I mean, just to add, that's what we have done in the past. When we did the ops discretion one, for example, people edited it and changed it, looked at it, you know, that's been reshared. And that's the value of the working group, really, that we break the silos, we share, and the good ideas come in. And obviously I'm quite well connected with everybody, so if I hear of something's been done well, then I'll point that out to everybody. Alistair, is that a legacy hand up, or
no? Just a quick one, John, and just to keep everyone straight. Anyone that's publishing a document or sending their policies and procedures, anything that's sent outside your business belongs to your business. So please, if you are sharing something, please have the approval to share it, or depersonalize it so that it's anonymous and not from a specific location. That could expose you to a problem if you do send something out that says your airport or location, etc., that later gets republished or whatever. Everything you do belongs to your employer in this application, so please be careful. I'm sure your employer won't object, and in fact, he should be immensely proud of what you're saying. But please just make sure your ducks in a row. I'd hate you to get caught out later on, guys.
Thanks, Alistair. Yeah, really. Yeah, that's a really useful point. Keith Atkins.
John, is there any? Will we be able to share Taylor's presentation as well?
I was just going to ask Taylor that. I did, just so you're all aware, I actually had approached the FBU 3 times through different ways, because my logic was, when I spoke with by email to Simon Petts with a FOA, was I thought, well, if they won't speak to me, maybe a FOA can reach out to the FBU, because at the end of the day, a lot of their members are also aviation firefighters. I got 0 response from the FBU. I tried nationally and locally in my old brigade. I contacted the brigade secretary. I just run into a wall. Taylor, are you still here?
I am, yeah. I don't think there should be any problem with sharing the presentation around. I can triple check, but
yeah,
everything in there you should be able to find online anyway. So
okay.
I think it should be okay.
Right. I mean,
John,
just to
John,
add. Go on.
John, I've got one more question. This is more aimed at Mark. Mark, I don't know if you got more leverage on this one. We have medical standards. Is there any sort of benefit now, maybe including PSA checks as part of our medical standards through the for your organisation, and maybe towards Simon as well through the AFOA?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm scribbling very busily here. So and I need quite a conversation. I think this is something which I believe AOA, AFOA, other organisations, IAFPA, JOIF should really actually be joining hands on and getting some commonality. So, so I think in short, yes.
The thing with it, if it's part of the medical standards, then as we said about costing of testing, it covers, like with our employers, is that it's a must, not a nice to have, really, or as and when things go wrong.
Yeah, and I think collectively, you know, the position that we should be in as those industry bodies, and particularly the AOA, is to basically then put pressure on our regulators and rule setters to help pull it through that way. Yeah, that's where the ultimately, you know, particularly in aviation, we're kind of very much a black and white line item compliance sort of part of the industry more than anywhere else. And I think if something gets detailed within that, that could be quite helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Mark. Is there anything that anybody else would like to say that we haven't covered? Anybody got anything to add to the meeting?
John, just one thing from me. I'm not sure if I speak for all, but I just want to say a huge thanks for pulling this together. Really sings home the relevance of how serious this is. So a big thank you to you and the others that have supported this.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, it's as I say, it's a passion of mine. I think, you know, like I say, you're well aware of the journey that I've been on, and I wouldn't like anybody to go through it without having the insight, if you will. Just a point for all of you to take away, because I know some of you have got staff members or have lost staff members. There is some great networks out there. The ones that people know the most, you know, Macmillan, etc., are there. But there's a huge network of firefighters. The Firefighter with Cancer on Facebook that I'm in, it's actually quite a humorous group, given the conditions of many of the guys in there. They've still got firefighter humour flowing through the brains, and there's a network of support, and I'm quite happy to put people in touch with those. So James Vizard and Steve Parry had your hand up.
Yeah, morning everyone. Just a sort of a get people's opinions on diesel exhaust extraction systems. We seem to be having a bit of resistance from our management at the moment about having an installation put in. Just really try and get a bit of a gauge on what other people are doing or what other people have got.
James, what type of engines do you have? What are your appliances?
So we've got the Angloco MAN 4x4s at the moment.
Okay, that's the new ones, the MPRVs.
Yeah, we were sort of the first people to get that style.
Yeah.
We were the trial.
Yeah, is it the Euro 5 engine that's in it, or the Euro 3 engine? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Yes, yeah, they'll be classing that as a low emission engine, and it's not relevant. Probably, it's something that unfortunately you'll have to take back to Capita on, James. There'll be a lot of politics behind that one. The later engines are so the Euro 5s and Euro 6s, you know, because there isn't the big black plume of smoke coming out of them. And obviously the newer engines, the exhausts are lower down, so there is some technical challenges. But I think in the case, the business case was that there was no need for exhaust extraction with the new appliances. But I'm not sure how that played out over the whole span of the contract at every location, James, I'm afraid. But you need to take that back to Capita.
Okay, thank you.
James, there's a couple of other things just to quickly add as well. It depends on the exposure time from the individuals when they're doing DIs, etc., and the layout of your bays, whether you've got drive-through bays and how you operate your DIs with the doors up outside. So there's a number of factors to point out.
Yeah, but this is we've been considering, you know, a very small station, and unfortunately, the positioning of people's like fire kit is actually at exhaust level. So when the vehicle drives out of the bay, the exhaust is projecting onto people's fire kit. It goes past our door to our clean areas, if you like the kitchen and the crew room. There is evidence starting to come now on the white walls are slowly starting to turn black. So there is some form of particulates being projected onto those walls.
James, whereabouts are you, if you don't mind me asking?
In Alderney, in the Channel Islands.
Right. Okay. Those engines on, you know, that obviously. Sorry, I thought you were a DFR. They will probably have carbonation in that exhaust outlet. I think best practice, first of all, is move your PPE. It's certainly going to be contaminated. If it's that older engine and there is contaminants, being physically aware, if you're seeing them on your clothing and everything, then I would be saying, listen, something needs to be done, guys. You know, the newer engines, it's virtually impossible to see what's coming out of them. But if you are seeing them, then there's one or two things. Either you've got an engine problem, you know, and that maybe needs to be looked at. But certainly, if you're getting contaminants on clothes and you're seeing colouring on the wall, yeah, as Neil says, do all your DIs outside and everything. Don't rev the engine, you know, until you're outside the station. But it sounds as if there's something going on there, and it may be an engine fault as much as anything else. So you maybe need to get that looked at.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Steve Parry, are you still there, Steve?
I am, John. Good morning. First of all, if anyone doesn't know me, I'm from the Civil Aviation Authority. So yes, the regulator is on this one. So John, appreciate the invitation to this meeting. Absolutely fantastic to see so many people and to see the topics discussed there. Being a cancer survivor myself, very close to my heart, and I'm happy to run with this from a CAA point of view if I can be kept in the loop, to take it back and see if there's anything we can do to help this topic.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, reason for inviting you and Tommy. I know that you've been to the meetings before, Mark Freeman has. Tommy's attended many of them. I know he's busy today. He was tentative. But it is one of the reasons why I always invite the CAA, because with anything, if the regulator's with us, it's much easier to sort of keep people in the loop. Abby?
Mine was just in response to James. We have multiple research developments on kind of diesel exhaust. It might not be specifically relevant to the exact cab that you have, but if you want to drop me a note, I could share that directly or share it to John for the group. If you do need to go back to the supplier and find more information or just create a case, then maybe this information or the scientific studies will help you with that.
Thanks, Abby. Simon Cole.
Hello there. Yeah, just got a question. It's probably, Abby, this might be more your domain. Regarding the cleaning of fire kit, obviously we're our own worst enemy for training and the exposure. I'm just wondering how effectively we can clean our own fire kit. Is there a belief that we can clean it on station, either in a domestic or industrial washing machine, or Is there a study that says we're better off sending that away to be professionally cleaned to be effective?
So there is some research on cleaning and development that I can share with you on that. The UK is a little bit behind on creating the British standard for cleaning, but I do believe it's coming in shortly and it is now complete. That's the difference between the UK and the US. Really, is the US there is a set cleaning procedure, whereas the UK there is not. You can wash. I think that the main requirements now are usually 60 degrees C. But some manufacturers will still require you to wash it at 40, and that will be on the label. So you'll have to check the actual kit that you have. But in general, the majority of studies have shown that at 60C with the detergents provided, it's getting rid of what you need to. But I know that there is some research going on. I'm not sure if Taylor has done any more of this, is after washing, testing, the garments again for contaminants after washing, just to show that those contaminants have been removed. But I know that the general advice is kind of 60C with the detergents provided. It is providing a clean enough kit for you to wear.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm aware that our fire kit is labelled up at 40 degrees, so it's interesting to hear that 60 is more effective. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. Kieran?
Hi, John. Yeah, it was just a bit of additional commentary for Simon with regards to washing. Our fire kit at Wharton was procured at the early part of this year, and a parcel of that procurement, we included a washing agreement with the supplier and manufacturer of the kit. And as a commentary, there's 3 different types of wash that they offer, which is a standard wash, a biological wash to include contaminants with biohazards, including obviously bodily fluids, etc., and there's also one for asbestos. So just to, I suppose, add a little bit of flavour to your question about is there a wash? Well, the manufacturers are offering 3 different types, so I'd suggest that if you're just doing one type of wash at your own station or establishment, it's probably not enough.
Thanks, Kieran.
Thanks, Kieran. Martin Lindsay.
Yeah, we like Kieran, we had when we bought Bristol, you get the care package and you'll send it off 6 monthly as a watch to get it done. But because of the amount of training you do, there's the interim washers where they are eating smoke, so they are contaminated before those washers and inspections. So we've just invested heavily in a unit at Baccaros, a bespoke washing machine, industrial one what's been recommended, a helmet washer, and the light with drying facility. And even we've just been trialling BA sets in it last week, so when they've had a hot wear as well, the strip down the BA sets go in the washer as well, as per manufacturer's instruction. We're just working through it, so again, once we're up and running with it properly, I can forward you details on that for you to have a look. But we're still going to kit maintain with Bristol, I don't know, 6 monthly because they're inspecting it. But we've still got to keep as records when you've had a hot wear that they tally up that the equipment's had a wash after. So it's just building up that history of the equipment and the washing procedure that correlates with training.
Thanks, Martin. Jamie?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, it's probably our next line that we're going to be producing, and we're starting to work on it now, which is a fabric cleaning solution to effectively remove contaminants at a decent temperature, so it won't affect the use of PPE, and also for workwear, which is often not considered. So everyone will consider the cleaning of the PPE, but until particulate blocking is effectively in place, the workwear is almost just as contaminated.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. Has anybody got anything they'd like to add before we end? Nikki?
Yeah, John, interesting to hear from Martin or anybody else who's procured one of these washers. We are looking at getting one of these washers for the BA and helmets and gloves. So we'd be interested to learn from anybody who's got experience from that and whether they'd be willing to share. Thanks.
Yeah, I can connect you up with Martin. It might take a bit of understanding in being a Yorkshire lad, but I can help you with that. Sorry, Martin. Alistair.
Yeah, John, we actually looked about 4 years ago about bringing equipment washing industrial washers into local authority fire services. And the big challenge that we had at the time was that the various manufacturers, Draeger, Interspiro, Scott, etc., wouldn't accept, wouldn't sign off the equipment and kit that had been passed through those as being you know, suitable. They wouldn't sign off the detergents and they wouldn't sign off the machines. So just a word of warning, guys, if you are buying equipment, first of all, make sure your equipment supplier signs it off, and make sure that whilst you might have equipment today, it might not be your equipment that you're using for the next 3 years. So if you're just about to change, check that your possible future suppliers will sign off the equipment, because I noticed Draeger, you know, are now launched their whole product range, and that was probably their tactic, was don't sign off anyone else's and launch your own product. So there seems to be a bit of a game going on in the industry that you can't get certain machines approved for certain suppliers. So just be very careful on that, guys.
Thanks, Alistair. Right, well, I know everybody's busy. I really want to thank everybody who's took the time to join today. Myself and Neil discussed about me getting the in-person meetings back up and running as the airports come back online. That's something that I'm going to start off in the new year with the Southern and Scottish and North Midland one again in the same format as before. I obviously will keep nudging along on this because you know, it's something I do feel passionately about, and I've got, you know, that personal insights in, and I know that there are people on stations who do the same. Thanks to everybody for joining the meeting. My speakers, Taylor, Abby, David, Jamie, Alistair, and the overseas guests that have dialed in, Edgar and Colin and Ivan, Adrian, Nikki, John. If I find the other stuff as it comes through to me from Australia, Peter, etc., as I say, the next bit, I'll create a repository for documents, and then I'll send a link out to say, right, here you go, guys, this is what we've compiled, have a read. So thanks very much, everybody. Everybody stay safe, and I'll bump into you as and when I'm on site or whatever. So thanks again, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Okay, thank you,
Take
John.
care, everybody. See you later.
Cheers, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, John.
Cheers, John. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Thanks to all the speakers as well. Really appreciate your time.